Let's go, Patty, Mario.
Así que bueno, vamos a empezar. Vamos a empezar con Patty, Mario y después Felipe. Patty. Yes. So what I can see from the reforms of national waters, it is that we are going to go back to the right state to reinforce the state. And this is something that the country, Mexico, was needing. There was a lack of control about concessions that are still affecting, because this has not started yet, just in some parts, when we talk about access to water. Among the topics more highlighted in these reforms, it is the human rights to water and, of course, sanitation. Mexico is a country that is facing horrible pollution, um, and this is having an impact in the health. And we need to highlight it. We are facing a sanitation issue that is having an impact into the communities that are around. And so with this reform, there are some changes to assume it with responsibility. So what I see are those main modifications, those main changes that will allow us to access to different mechanisms that will be important to manage water correctly. Thank you very much, Patty. Mario, you have the floor.
I was saying there are three key elements that are quite disruptive in the water management in Mexico. The first one has to do with the resignation of rights, and the transmission of them between particulars and institutions. The second point is the famous National Fund of Water Resources that is outside of this context of the water balance. So there is a double accounting. So that law was seeking the sustainability through the integrative co-management. And what the original text of the law says is that the right transmission and the recovery of water volume was to for that sustainability. They wanted to reduce overexploitation. But since we have that fund, that's not part of that scheme. And that brings uncertainty because we don't see any regulations, criteria, or principles, or we don't even know how the fund will work. And maybe the most problematic point is the centralization of the decision-making process of water management. So a group of public officers will decide how to manage that resource and who will they assign that resource or not. And of course, it will have a significant impact, and it will impact because society will not have that, that key role in decision making. And now the law has mentioned in a very limited way the integrative management. But how can we achieve that if there is a central management? And the central administration will be deciding. So the theory of the reform was redistributing the water in a better way, as Patty was saying, to avoid the grabbing of that resource. That was the spirit of the reform. But with the changes made, it's quite clear that they want to achieve a central control of the water resources. So the main offices will decide who will have that resource or not. And it reminds me to an old case, a similar one, and we know what happened in a certain territory. So the current users of national waters and the ones who are seeking to become users will be affected. The industrial and service sectors will be highly impacted because we have some juridical uncertainty, and that's precisely what they wanted to avoid. A juridical uncertainty. They don't have the control of the water volume, and someone unilaterally will decide where that water will go. So, but I think that is quite worrying is that the economic development that the regions, states, and municipalities were generating now is in the hands of a few central office workers. And they will decide what will happen. I mean, if a new company wants to be founded or not, or if they need these water resources. So cities and municipalities depend on a few central officers, public officers. In that context, makes us focus on the law to find clarity. We need clear objectives and laws that are impartial to reassign water resources. So the problem is that water purification is limited and will be limited and will depend on the decision of a few public officers. So, the reserve fund water and other water resources are not guaranteed. We need more guarantees in the law. We need it to be modified. And with all my respects, I had to manage water. I did that. When the previous law was enforced. And that reform brings us back to the moment in which I managed water. When, from a central level, they decided if the water would be assigned or not to a particular person without water access. And they were saying, well, try find some rights because we don't have water access here. And that person who went to ask for water, didn't have any guarantees. And we are going back to that time. Well, worse, because now only a few public officers, central officers, will be in charge of all of that. And that centralization of the power, as we see in this new reform, is quite dangerous for all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. And let's now move to Felipe, and then we'll do a second round. Thank you. I want to give more context of both laws, the national water law and federal water law. None of them, any law in the world, works if we don't have a competent authority that can comply with it in a society that respects that. I participated in some of the meetings to the law reform, and I asked them if with that proposal of the new law that was back then, and if with that water commission, the reform could be applied. And they answered, no, simply no. No, that was the answer. So if it's a good or a bad law, we still need to talk more about that. But the previous national water law was bad. What would we say now? What would we say if we had achieved the basin regulation? What would have happened if we had achieved other things? Or if there was a measurement of the consumption, what would we saying now if we had applied properly the previous law? So I don't really know if we had to change it or not. So Patricia and Mario already discussed about why it was changed. That national water law, it talks about concessions, and I don't want to deepen in, but I expected and what concerns regarding the Rio Bravo Basin is that there are urgent matters that were left outside of that reform. So we are not tackling the climate change issue. Yes, they were talking about concessions and so on, but we are not giving importance to climate change. We are not talking about basin and sea models. We are not tackling the problems of modern technology. So to me, it's not an old law, it's kind of, it's a harsh law with some changes and adaptations, with new conceptions. But there's something pending, and I hope we can promote that in the regulation to include the concepts that our country needs. We really need to protect by law some concepts, such climate change. Isn't that the moment to do that? Isn't it? It's not in the law, it's left outside. So I agree with Maria and Patricia. We are already in here, and parallelly, we need to check both laws. So even if we were invited to talk about the changes, I think the general law could, well, still have some benefits for the basins. Well, so yeah, maybe I should change my background to the desert after what we are discussing. You know, maybe I'm not that optimistic anymore. Yeah, we were talking about our backgrounds before you entered, and we were saying that only the ones who don't have the desert background are the positive ones. So, Patty, so I don't know if you want to say anything else. I would like to ask you if you could share something that went well, something that can be improved, something that should be changed, or which sectors will be impacted or will benefit more from this reform. So again, Patty, Mario, and Felipe. So thank you for the opportunity of talking again. And I know Dr. Arreguín and Mario, they like to talk about very controversial issues. Well, they invited us for a reason. And we have our reasons, you know. Well, yes. So you're provocative. So regarding what Dr. Arreguín is saying, he says climate change has been left outside, and it's not completely true. So there were some suggestions that were accepted regarding water security. Another point is that IMTA will intervene to work on the national water strategy. IMTA is working on climate change. So yes, modern technologies are also included. IMTA now is working on that. Every country is doing that, getting data through satellites. South Korea is doing that. Here in Mexico, well, we are doing that slowly. It was together with International Water Management Institute. So it was together with CONAGUA. We weren't in there, but because we were recovering the equipment of the institute, that's what I'm working on right now. Because our institute had no equipment, and now we're working on that. We're trying to strengthen the institute again, and we have very interesting project. And I believe that very soon we will comply with international standards. So don't worry about that. And the opportunity that we had was to participate in the reform, and I felt really it was an honor for me. Regarding to what Professor Mario López says regarding centralization, I disagree. There are very interesting papers that have to be read very carefully because it's not a law reform. So the big changes are not in there because we couldn't tackle everything at once. So the important thing was to have the new law. That's what we had to give to our nation. And now we have the opportunity to work on a good regulation. And in the regulation, we will decide on the house. And it's not about centralization. Of course, it's also being very controversial point, if water should be centralized or decentralized. And I believe during the last years and centuries, we've been trying to figure out what to do regarding decentralization or decentralization of water resources. So we have the law, and I think we can do a lot of things in the regulations, and I hope all of you can participate in the design of the regulation. And we are working in different channels that we have with academia. So we have different spaces with the academia, and the decision-making process included different scientific groups. IMTA was not part of those resources, of those groups, but now we are talking with them, trying to generate these communities to give more benefits to the water sectors, what we really need. So which are the actors that could benefit from this law? Well, in the Article 20 to 24, we see all that information with all the sectors, and the law is quite clear from the Article 20 to 24. That's it. Thank you.
I would like to make a comment for Patty. So for those people that are listening to us, before the national water law was kind of winning, right? And now we're talking about the general law of waters. So for me, is like there's a different translation into Spanish. Like the general law of waters is kind of an umbrella. And so, as I see it, what this law does, it is to get together what was written in the Constitution together with the national water law. And over there, we start talking about the human right to water, the human right to sanitation, and so on. We still have the national water law, or this is what I understood, but am I right? Yes, exactly. So we have two laws. And everyone says, why do we have two laws? So because there's one law that is regulated the human right to water, and it is a pity that when we talk at an international level, when we say we have a law to ensure the human right to water, because in any country there's no laws. That is something natural. A government knows that they need to supply water to their population. But that is the point where we got. And this is why we needed to had those two laws. The trend be for those laws to get together at the end. But now we had two laws. We need to ensure the human right to water. And yeah, it is a pity, but this is what happens in this country, and little by little we are going to fix it. Yes, was just to give some context. So Mario, Felipe, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. So I think Felipe was pretty clear. The lay as it is with the reform is cannot be applied because the water authority do not have the means nor the resources to be able to apply it. So the question will be, was the reform really needed? If there are many things in the previous law, for example, the reform of 2004, and there were many things that were not even approved, were not even working. And now there is another change with the new law. So the subject, it is not about the law. We can get to human right to water, as Patty was saying, with the previous law. It is simply just a subject related to having a solid authority, like a strong one, with resources and political will to do things. That was what we needed. This is what is happening as well today. Even if we have two laws, as Patty was saying, it is really a pity to be able to have to make some laws with, like, we have the general water law. And then we just leave it like that without resources to those that must implement it. Those are states and municipalities, and they do not have the resources that they need to apply it. And I'm sorry because this is my opinion. I know. What I feel that the reform was not needed. The general water law was needed, yes, but the reform of the water law was not needed. And I think we could have achieved exactly the same without modifying the law. The only thing we needed was an authority with resources. And now I would like to share with you an example so that you will understand why do I say that there was something going on with the integral water management. With the integral water management, they wanted to get a decentralization of decision making. When we centralize decision and there are no transmission of rights, this is something that is going to have a big impact to those people that want to have an integrated management. And why is that? Because nowadays there is an external actor in Ciudad de Mexico that they need to take into account when they want to manage water in a state or in a basin. So let's imagine someone from the government that go to a foreign country that wants to get investors for their study. We have different states, get Jalisco, Zacatecas, Chihuahua, for example. Let's imagine just someone that goes to the a foreign country to get investments. The answer is going to be, do you have energy? Yes, I do have energy. Do you have water? No, I don't have water, but I need to go to the central level to ask for water because they are going to decide how to allocate it. And this is what then they will say, I don't want you to establish in Mexicali. Just go to Veracruz because there's a lot of water. That is not the issue we're talking about. It is a decision taking into account many elements of the place where an enterprise will be. And that is in the hands of the central level, not from a governor or the basin council. Another example, and there's something that Felipe was saying, the only agreement that works in the country is the Lerma Chapala Basin. It is a really good integrated management where in the Basin Council, without a political will, just with a technical decision, they are managing water and it is working correctly. And we are talking about surface water. And I know that my friend Gabriel Segovia will hate me because there is a project, Solís León, and they are saying that there is a unique regulation in Mexico where it says that any kind of saving water will be there to sustain the basin following the objectives of the national water law. And what is going to happen with the savings of water in 11 districts? They're going to take it for human consumption or not? So where is the integral management? Where is it over there? In the decision of some people that are in at a central level in Kanawha. That's all. Those are some examples about why it is not possible to have an integrate management of water anymore. According to the best international practice and principles. So why a state will carry out their water program if they need to take into account that water matters will be made in another place. This is something that worries me, and this is why I believe that what Patty said is essential. We need to clarify those things that appear in the regulation because maybe there are things that we are not reading correctly. We need to give more details about things. That is what we need to do, giving more details in the regulation. But remember, law is what, and regulation is how things are made. And this is a place where we need to have an impact. We cannot just go to the past. No, we need to work with the like this law that we have. But at the end of the day, I believe that it's going to have like feeling back to the 70s when we had the federal water law, where decisions were made at a central level. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Yes. So I agree with something that you said. It is great, of course, to have human right to water, sanitation, and I believe that is good, of course. And I agree with what you said that in Mexico, the problem are not laws. It is to apply those laws. And so the previous law, if we would have applied it, there was, for example, number one, like domestic number one, and number two was like a public urban. It was not explicit, but it was ensure like human right to water. You can check that out. But you can find all this information in the national water law. And I see that we have a pretty interesting question. Maria Eugenia Gonzalez did it. How will the water law will be regulated? How much would it be in time and money in Mexico to ensure the human right to water? Well, so since I was born in 1980 or more, since always we try to get to there. I don't know how much would that be in water? The 5% is like really expensive. So we get to the 90% of coverage, and that is pretty linear. But then from 90 to 100%, it is super expensive. But as per what you were saying, Mario, I still spend my hours thinking about how to implement or this law on the previous law. And of course, if we can help somehow, well, can I answer to what the comment that you just made? Yes, of course, go ahead. So 5 or 6 years ago, an exercise was made. This exercise was named 2030 Agenda. And then this exercise was updated. Back on that time, we got some value of about 110,000 millions of pesos to balance aquifers, to balance surface water basins, to ensure the human right to water, and to reduce the flood control. Of course, that number, it is even bigger now because we have not advanced in any sense. We have not advanced in sanitation. We have not evolved in flood control. We have not improved the technification of risk. And CG says, what can we do to reinforce and consolidate a sustainable water management? So that is pretty easy. We need to invest and we need to have a strong authority so that the law will be respected. The number of employees for water administration, for the technical part, it is minimized. The CONAGUA stopped measuring the water cycle. There are not a measurement of water quality. There is not a measurement of surface water. There is not measurement of rainfall. And this is how we want to improve the administration of water. It is really hard if we continue that way. This is what we need to do. So law is there, we cannot change it. So what we need to do is to strengthen the authority that is there. And my friend Gabriel will know there are two inspectors of groundwater in Guanajuato. Well, there are more wells in between Chihuahua and Guanajuato. In those places, there are the bigger quantity of wells in the country. This is how we want to administrate waters.
From 2002, I've seen the central offices being reduced to 1/3 of what it was in 2004. The first time I visited it, Mario told me the Kunawa you see in 2002 is the half of what I saw in the 90s. And well, I heard something from Patty, that was quite nice. When Patty told me they were working on improving the law. And some years ago, I was afraid that they wanted to dismantle IMTA, and I'm really happy they are part of the law. It's still alive. Yeah, but I don't know, it was not quite clear, Felipe? Well, first of all, I wanted to agree to what Mario said. We worked together in that project. That works perfectly. And yeah, the risk that someone takes decisions and just erases all the work you've done in the basin assembly. The users were there and we did that all together. We achieved all that together. Yesterday I came back from Villahermosa and someone already decided that the dams will be to its minimum level, and everything what already was established, it doesn't appear. And I'm using these examples that are quite technical just to show the risk that the central laws can have, so the laws that centralize the power of the decision making. Yeah, of course we have to take into account the weakness of the institution. We can't forget about this. Our institutions are weak. And while we don't strengthen the institution and the water institutions, and now with the national law, while we don't strengthen the national and municipal water authorities, what requires lots of money, then we can do good things. Of course, there are things we can improve, and of course, there are things that work. And Patty, lots of years ago, the tendency was the integrative management, and then we moved to water security. And now we need to include the global change that includes climate change. So global warming. So now I wanted to move to the second question. Let me just check one point.
Gracias.
He was my professor, my PhD. So, yeah, I'll move to the second question. And then we have very good questions in the chat. So, which are the implications of this general law and its modifications? So the LAN, the National Water Law, in regards of the authorities. So we know Rio Bravo, we know Tijuana, Colorado, the aquifers that we share. So how could it reform influence management and governments of transboundary river basins? First Patty, then Maria, and then Felipe. Yes, I wanted to go back to what my colleagues mentioned before. They're saying that the National Commission of Water is being reduced, but the same happened in Australia. So what was reduced was the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic body, and the National Water Commission is now made up of 20 people. They don't need more people. So we have a stronger meteorological service now to know the water that we have in the country, and not only the water that is falling, but the water that we treat, and also underground water. And I think that's key. The second point is that they allowed society to commit and engage to be the ones who could take care and manage the resource in a controlled way. Because if not, you could just do things wrong. And something that no one said, but I think that it's key to mention in the law, is the planification to short, middle, and long term. Why? I mean, we're not talking about in the next 6 years. This country changes. We are talking about the next 30 and 50 years, and it brings a different perspective. What happened with Agenda 2030? It was a long-term agenda. Like that's a tool that has not been achieved. We have monitoring systems, and we are not only planning for the next 6 years. We are looking for the long term. What happens regarding the implications, the influence that should that law have in the boundary basins? Well, I think we will have more clarity, and we'll see that in Rio Bravo Basin. We need order because there everybody does what they want. Another good thing that this law has is that the law talks about basins, the law talks about regions. And even if we are talking about basins, it was left outside. Now we have the mechanisms, we have the lines, we have the protocols. Okay, we mentioned that we need to develop the regulations, but it will bring order. That's what we need in this country. So what Mario was mentioning about the brewery, why do you have to build some industry where we don't have water? Let's be realistic, let's be honest. We know where we don't have water. We know the implications of climate change for our country. We see the tendencies. And we've developed a tool to predict droughts. So precisely to act. So to me, it's very positive what this new law brings us regarding the transboundary basin and also to the southern part of the country. Thank you. Yeah, here in the chat, I was about to write specifically page H, second chapter. You know, it says that it will have a strategic approach with different elements, and here we see some of them. You know, the number 6, the international tools that are from the Mexican state that impact in the compliance of the objectives of the national strategy. So everything has to be included within this national planning. So, second question, Mario. Some question, Felipe. How do you think this new general law, influence the management and governance of transboundary river basins? Well, I shared an example earlier, La Zapala, and in that context, with the modification of the law, I think that the board of Rio Bravo management has lost the opportunity to manage the water together with users and the states, as it was done somewhere else. Why? Because to assure the compliance with the treaty, well, they have to do something different. And Pat is right. In Rio Bravo Basin, there's not order at all. But that's the consequence, not from the law. It's the consequence of a lack of, well, the work of the authorities, about work of the water authorities. We know where they are. We know our failures, our mistakes, but the law allowed us to make them. We needed more budget, a strong authority, and political willingness. That's the key point. I don't see that anywhere. So in Rio Bravo Basin, in Colorado River Basin, the decision will be made from Ciudad de Mexico, and they will decide how they will regulate it. They'll try to, of course, bring some order, but that will bring some polemics. And maybe we'll see these horrible images that we saw in Chihuahua when the dam was tried to be opened to give some water to the United States. So the resignation of water that should manage the national water body is to guarantee the sustainability and the compliance of the treaty, giving in a more regular way the water, and not as we are doing today. So you see, we are waiting for the hurricane to see our dams fall, and then we just open the doors. So the decision of complying with the treaty nowadays is at the central government. So it's in the hands of the central government. And it should guarantee the compliance of the law, and the economical and social and political impact will be very significant, because they are not only taking our rights, they are taking the water out. Of course, there will be political implications, and it will have a high implication in the campaign when they run for the campaign. The reform does not contribute to a better management between the stakeholders at a binational level. It will improve the institutional reputation of Mexico, saying, well, now we will comply with the treaty, but the social, economical, and political impact is quite high.
There is a big social resistance to respect the law, and there's a problem between the three levels of governments, like the federation, the states, and municipalities, depending of the color of each one of the states and each one of the municipalities. And eventually there will be a binational conflict. So taking that into account, we need to be alert. We need to take into account like damage control and mitigation that will be needed. But what are those mitigations? So it is money, budget, and incentives to be able to reduce the impact of the reform in the different sectors, because we need to take into account what was done in the basin of the Colorado River in the minute 319, the payment for water not used, a fiscal compensation to users, an acknowledgement for saving water, so that. And then there was the same problem, and there was a huge investment to protect the basin. This is something that Patty mentioned before: soil use, the territorial planification, and an investment to protect water resources. So we see that that rainfall are reducing due to climate change in Colorado, in Bravo, in Tijuana as well. Rainfall is not present. So we need to try to promote clean energies and nature-based solutions to try to maintain water, like the few water that we can get, depending of the intensity of rainfalls. And I imagine that my friend Rosario would like what I'm going to say. It is urgent for us to have a program to recharge aquifers, because if we do not save water underwater, when water is in the upper side, it will evaporate. Why is that? Because the basin from Rio Bravo and the Colorado one are getting desertified, they're getting dry. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Felipe, we were talking about coordination. Maybe this law is improving the coordination. But I think it's the same as Mario said. If we were not coordinating correctly before, how are we gonna do it now? Just with this law. And yes, I see that there's still basin organisms, basin councils, users, boards, and I try to be optimistic. I really hope that we will give it the strength that basin needs. Felipe, go ahead. Yes, I would just like to share again the right, like the sentence that I used at the beginning, and I said that there is not the best law in the world that will exist if there's not a strong authority that will be able to apply it and a society that will be able to respect it. This is the first sentence that I said today, and I'm not criticizing laws. And I'm not hesitating about the application of laws, but I think that an input that could do the general water law to the national water law is it is the strengthening from the general law to the basin councils, and spatially share responsibilities between the three levels of government. As you know, we have spent more than 20 years with regulations, and sometimes participation with the state governments have not been clear. So maybe this law will get us closer to state governments, to municipal governments, and maybe this is useful to reinforce the national water law. So on the paper, there are good things as well, but we need to see who could do those things that are here, there, and that's all. So Felipe, that is a really good comment that you just made, and I think you're right. Of course, laws can be applied and they are okay, and I really like comment that you made. A society need to respect the law because it is not just the law or the government. It is all of us that we need to do our bit. And since the previous one, we were not saying human right to water. It was like domestic and urban use. And so if in the previous law were having some issues to take some water to municipal use or to domestic use, well, now it's going to be hard. I really hope that we will have the strength and the will. And I wrote some notes over here while I was listening to you. Love is not words, it is fact. So the facts over here will be to respect the law. And in order to respect the law, we need money, we need people, we need to do our efforts. It is not just talking about that. No, it is doing things, making things. And something that I really liked is that I'm a great fan of Linta. Yes, we are all great fans of Linta. So I'm going to share the questions in the chat again. So the first one, the one made by Maria Eugenia, Sam, can I say something? So Raúl Morales said, we already have two laws. How will the needed changes take place? Sorry, Rosario wanted to say something. Thank you, colleague. Thank you for listening to me and for saying it. So before going to the questions, I would like to say something. And I would like to confirm if this is what I understood. This is something that Mario mentioned. So what I understood, yes, go ahead, Rosario. Oh, should I go to the Spanish? Voy a hablar en inglés, no se preocupen. Corríjame si me equivoco, pero esto es lo que yo entendí. Están diciendo que en el mundo ideal, en las condiciones ideales, la reforma daría a México más más capacidad o confiabilidad para poder cumplir con el Tratado de 1944, asumiendo que la ley se puede aplicar. Mario, you have the floor. So explicitly, the law do not talk about international engagement. Since a long time ago, the discussion was if they wanted to include transboundary waters in the law or not. And so the External Relations Secretariat always said no, because this is a national water instrument. And national waters are used to respect like a higher obligation, which is the 1944 treaty. But as I was previously saying, the reform established a regime to administrate water rights that are different to what they were in the past. And so this new administration regime of water rights allows the National Water Commission to make decisions without consulting states and municipalities and users in order to ensure the water the water entry according to the treatment. And why is that? This is because of reallocation of water and the evaluation criteria saying you are not using water correctly, you are using water in an inefficient way, are not using the concession title of volume. So Conagua has the possibility to get water, to say it like in a colloquial way, and to put it on the ground. And as we don't know, apart from the human right to water, that it has to be like the main objective, but it is not clear enough, Conagua could decide, like, let's imagine that one year there's a lot of rainfall. Okay, so we will give water. But if we have bad water, but years, as it happened in the 5 or 6 last years, Conagua can decide, I will take this water and I will give it to the United States, and I will not be thinking about hurricanes or the San Juan River that today is there. It is not able to respond to all the needs of the United States users. And why is that? Because it is really low. And there are users that are taking water between Amistad and Falcon and in the lower part of the Falcon Dam. So that means that the law and the reform have some elements to administrate water resources in Mexico that are different. And so the National Water Commission can make decisions, as Patri was saying, to avoid the disorder that existed or that still exists in the Rio Bravo Basin. I would like to say something according to that. We carried out some webinars with the Rio Bravo Basin Council, and we had an objective. We wanted to know if the members of the Rio Bravo Basin Council were aware of an allocation agreement. And most of them, because this was like we took into account users, decision making people, and everyone, they said that it was needed and urgent. So over there's an agreement, there's a consensus, even with the representative that came from Chihuahua. And even the representative from Chihuahua said, yes, we need to check that out. His position was, so if we give water, then we need to get an economical compensation because we're not producing, because we are giving water away. this is something that needs to be discussed with numbers, how water is being overexploited. And something that we have not mentioned and the law mentioned is it is the reuse. In this country, water reuse was something that was made, but it was not included in the law. And now we want to talk about the use of regenerated water. I would like to say that in this law, we're talking about water reuse. We are talking about communities as well, like community groups, and the gender-based approach that was not there before. So I believe that this is a law that is giving you elements for all this negotiation process, and that, of course, those will be included and will have an impact in the transboundary regions.
And
Thank you.
Rosario, just for the last, I put it on the chat, the articles that I think that are related with the, I'm not sure if it is reliability. I think now we have the National Hydrologic Plan and the Strategic Plan. So, now we used to have one, and we're gonna have two. But in that one, in the Strategic Plan, it says that it should be considered as anything signed with international or with other countries. Again, I think here, what can be, so again, the problem is not the law. Who is going to enforce it? Like, really, at this point, someone tell me the names. What is the, what are the offices? I really, at this point, sure, it's in the books. Give me the names. Give me who should I call to actually make sure that this is happening. Anyway, let me go back to the Spanish.
Dear Samuel, what we need to see in this country is what happens parallelly, so simultaneously. So there are being other modifications for peace and the general law for the environmental sustainability. If you want, we can also speak in French. You know, you are switching between English and Spanish. Well, I think that's one of the things that we will be looking for, because in front of the lack of new concessions for agrarian and industrial uses, there's only one solution. So we need to comply with the norm 2021. And for most of us, for 2027, things will get quite difficult. So even if we are reducing water de facto in all of the basins of our country, and also Rio Bravo and Rio Colorado, so we will only have one option, and is that we don't use this great water to where we used to, and that we bring it to another treatment plant, such as the one here in Jalisco, this plant. And this transforms this water into a potable one according to the law. But we can't use great treated water. But that's the water that we need to offer to the industry, you know, to keep developing. Especially because of the problems that they will face if they want to bring new industries. And that with the support of the new law. So something that was being wasted now is an asset for the economic development of the state. So I need to comply with a norm, the 2021, and I can't do it getting more water, so I will treat the water to comply with the unloading norm, and now we will use that treated water to try to use it better, to try to use water better. And I think that's key. Thank you. So, here we have some questions for Dr. Felipe. So how could we consider that current technology is becomes management tool, taking into account that some decades ago we started with models of aquifers that were innovative tools that were not applied in management. So I'll paste again that question here in the chat, and Felipe, it's all yours. Well, again, it's the same. So we need to have the technical capacity to understand and to manage that, because if not, well, of course you can outsource it, but you need to have capacity within the authorities. Guillén and you were part of that. But then we need the technical staff. You know, they didn't know what they had to do, and we need to strengthen the institutions. We need strong institutions with enough social, human, and economic resources. So that's it, Carmen Julia. We need to give more technical capacities to the authorities. And Maria López, one question for you. Also from Carmen Julia. Wow. From Chihuahua to the world. Well, a question for Mario. So if we have the new laws, instead of looking to the past, what can we do in the present to strengthen a strong management? Wow, that's a great point. Well, we only can innovate. There's nothing else we can do. You know, my friend Gabriel won't allow me to lie. So I'll say the truth. I've shared in so many forums that in front of the circumstances as the one we're facing today, we only can divide the cycle of the global management and have a global management, the agrarian management, and the industry management. So if I have a water resource for an industrial park, then I have to make the most of it and reduce the extraction of water. We need to reuse water. That's another example. So the ones who knew my management in the border, you know that I truly believe in recharging the aquifers. Maybe you remember that happened in Chihuahua. I don't see any other option than keeping doing that. So we have severe weather events. So a severe raining in a short time. And some of that water is being stolen or evaporated. But why don't we use it? Why don't we generate some solutions based in nature and try to get that water? You know, maybe we could improve technology to desalinate water. So we need to use much better what we have, because climate change will have a real impact. And now we have a law that forces us to work in a in a very limited way. So urban planning of water needs to be efficient. We need to pay attention to the fountains. We need to treat water and we need to reuse it. We can't deload it. That happens with the agrarian use. We need agrarian companies. Vertical agriculture is the future, not extensive agriculture. In the industry, what happens with the industry? We need to reuse the water that we extract, and we need just bring it back to the national fund. So, in short, sustainability will be achieved through technology, capacity building, investment, of course, and with the work of people, because as you mentioned, past will never come back. And we need to understand that's the only option we have. But you know, we were talking about hard and soft technologies, and here we have some colleagues. So Jesus is here, and we are preparing a thesis. So we were talking about virtual water for Rio Bravo Basin. So in Mexico DC, the virtual water that is reduced is 600 million of cubic meters. It's Cuchamala, we talk about aquifers, but we don't realize that our 600 million of cubic meters of virtual water. So Samuel, Jesus, and myself are working there in the boundary. We need to give a space to universities to work on that. Oh, but it was desperate. Some time ago, when I was the coordinator of the hydraulics, and I criticized the public workers, and I said that they were doing nothing. But then, when I became a public officer, I was criticizing the researchers, but we need to bind both worlds. We have talent in the universities. So, you know, that when we talk about technology, we need to understand who will participate, who participates in society. Nowadays, all of us work on artificial intelligence. All of us. There are many things that we need to let society know. So I see we're running out of time, but I would like to give also the floor to Patty to wrap up. Patty, any other comments? Before you get to your own birthday party. Well, imagine that your party is already over. Oh no. Well, what I wanted to share with you is let us give us the opportunity as a country, as public workers, as stakeholders, as water users. I'm talking about all of us, not only to academics. I'm talking as a society as a whole. In the Linta, we are developing the different programs for society. We want to bring science closer to society. And something that it's key and that I could confirm is that in one of the most extractive industries from this country, so mining, they are changing their mindset. So we visited a mine and they wanted to do some sanitation and improve the water of the community. And they stopped using the water that they got by consumption, and they are only using the water that they treat, and then they make the water potable and bring it back to the society. So you see, there's more cooperation, and it gives us hope. We can think about a better Mexico. We can integrate both parts. We all are part of the sustainability of that community called Mexico. Well, last comment regarding the national water law. I'll leave here a comment, a link with our opinion of the national laws, and you can check it. And maybe what we could do is some office hours. I don't know, Rosario, the ones of you who are interested, maybe we could have some time to talk about some sections, and try to fully understand the law, check the modifications. And what I want is the law to be respected, and enforced. I only want that we comply with the law. Okay, but don't cry. Don't cry. I'm so sorry. Yes. Well, let's all of us go to Patty's party. Yes. Yes. I only wanted to mention that there are very good and interesting ideas. And you see, the past is in the past, and what we have is the future that is to come. And I think the word of today is creativity. And yeah, and even if there's more centralization, it doesn't mean the municipalities doesn't have any responsibility or accountability. So, and they need to be creatives. And we can reuse some water. And it's the responsibility of the municipalities until it goes back to the central government. So we need to be creative in all of the sectors and at the different levels of the government. And I also want to repeat that we need to work on capacity building, because even if we have economic resources, without knowledge, we can't do anything. So capacity building, innovation, creativity, and inclusion. And spaces like the ones we have here today, we don't really need to be in the same place. We need to know that we have a place in which we can share our thoughts. Yeah, Felipe, the first sentence that you mentioned is also good. Did you remember? Yes, the best law of the world doesn't work if we don't have a strong authority that applies it and a responsible society that respects it. You see? Well, use that for social network. Please, I want to share that sentence. Well, it was lovely seeing you all. Maybe we can organize some office hours. And yeah, it was lovely seeing you all. Thank you. And happy birthday again, Patricia. Happy birthday. Bye bye. It's lovely seeing you all.